The mining station's cargo bay echoed with the harsh clatter of metal against concrete as Marcus Rodriguez wiped grease from his calloused hands. Another day fixing busted mining equipment on Kepler 442c. Another day watching alien ships come and go through the massive bay doors. The Zephyrian traders barely acknowledged the human workers, their serpentine forms gliding past with practiced indifference. Marcus had been stationed on this remote world for 3 years now, maintaining the equipment that kept the joint mining operation running. The pay was decent, the work honest, but the loneliness ate at him some days. Earth felt like a distant memory, and the aliens treated humans like useful tools rather than equals. A commotion near the loading dock caught his attention. 3 adult Zephyrians stood in a tight circle, their scaled bodies towering nearly 8 feet tall, iridescent wings folded against their backs. Their guttural language carried across the bay in harsh, clicking tones. In the center of their circle, something small and dark huddled against a shipping crate. Marcus set down his plasma wrench and walked closer, curiosity overriding his usual caution around the alien traders. As he approached, one of the Zephyrians noticed him and hissed something that sounded distinctly unwelcoming. The universal translator in his earpiece rendered it roughly as a command to stay away. But Marcus caught sight of what they were surrounding. A Zephyrian hatchling, no bigger than a large dog, cowered behind the crate. Its scales were a mottled brown-green instead of the brilliant blues and purples of healthy adults. Most shocking of all, its left wing hung at an unnatural angle, clearly malformed from birth. The right wing was stunted, barely half the size it should be. "The runt brings shame to our clutch," one of the adults snarled in accented standard. "It will never fly, never hunt, never contribute to the colony. We should have culled it at hatching." The hatchling pressed itself smaller against the crate, large amber eyes darting between the adults with obvious terror. Marcus felt his jaw clench. He'd seen enough bullying in his 42 years to recognize it in any species. "What's the plan, then?" Marcus called out, stepping closer despite the warning growls from the adults. The largest Zephyrian, scarred and battle-worn, fixed him with a cold stare. "Human mechanic, this does not concern your kind. Return to your machines." "Kid looks scared," Marcus said, keeping his voice level. "What happens to hatchlings that can't fly in your society?" A moment of tense silence stretched between them. The scarred leader's lips pulled back to reveal rows of sharp teeth. "They are removed. It is mercy. This one will starve or be killed by predators within days on our homeworld. Better to end its suffering quickly." The hatchling seemed to understand, shrinking even further into the shadows. Its small chest rose and fell rapidly with panicked breathing. Marcus felt something twist in his gut. Growing up with a disabled sister had taught him about society's casual cruelty toward those who were different. But at least humans had learned to adapt, to build ramps and prosthetics and support systems. This was just murder dressed up as mercy. "There might be another way," he said carefully. The Zephyrians exchanged glances. The leader's tail lashed against the ground with obvious irritation. "Speak quickly, human. Our ship departs within the hour." Marcus looked at the terrified hatchling, then back at the adults. An insane idea was forming in his mind, the kind of impulsive decision that had gotten him into trouble before. But sometimes trouble was worth it. "Leave it here. With me." The bay fell silent except for the distant hum of machinery. The Zephyrians stared at him as if he'd suggested eating plasma coils for lunch. "You jest," the leader finally said. "Dead serious. I'll take responsibility for it, feed it, house it, keep it safe. You said yourself it can't survive on your world, maybe it can survive here." The adult Zephyrians began arguing among themselves in their native tongue, wings rustling with agitation. Marcus caught fragments through his translator, words about honor, shame, and impossible solutions. During their debate, he crouched down near the crate. The hatchling watched him with those huge amber eyes, intelligence clearly visible behind the fear. Its scales were duller than they should be, and he could see malnutrition in its thin frame. But there was something else there. A spark of defiance, maybe. A refusal to simply give up. "Hey there, little one," Marcus said softly. "You understand Standard?" The hatchling nodded slightly, then glanced nervously at the arguing adults. "What's your name?" "Zix," came a whisper-quiet reply in a voice like wind chimes. "I'm Marcus. These jerks giving you trouble?" Another tiny nod. Zix's good wings shifted slightly, as if instinctively trying to shield the malformed one from view. The argument among the adults was intensifying. Marcus caught words about contamination and proper protocols. But he also heard something else, a note of uncertainty from the leader. "Look," Marcus said, standing and addressing them directly. "You're going to kill this kid anyway, right? What's the harm in letting me try something different? If it dies under my care, well, same result you were planning. But if it lives—" He shrugged. "Maybe that says something about giving up too early." The leader studied him for a long moment. "You know nothing of raising a Zephyrian hatchling, human. They require specific foods, environmental conditions, social structures. You would only prolong its suffering. Then teach me the basics." "Give me a chance to prove you wrong." More arguing in the alien tongue. Marcus waited, trying to project more confidence than he felt. What the hell was he thinking? He could barely take care of himself most days, living alone in his small habitat module behind the workshop. Now he wanted to adopt an alien baby? But every time he glanced at Zix, huddled and terrified behind that crate, he thought of his sister Sarah. How she'd struggled with cerebral palsy her whole life, while people whispered about what a burden she was to their parents. How she'd proved every single one of them wrong by becoming a brilliant engineer despite her disabilities. Maybe flying wasn't everything. Maybe there were other ways to soar. Finally, the leader turned back to him. "Very well, human, but understand, if you take responsibility for this defective hatchling, it becomes yours completely. We wash our hands of it. When it dies, as it surely will, the fault lies with you alone." "Understood," Marcus said firmly. The leader approached the crate and spoke to Zix in rapid Zephyrian. The hatchling's responses were barely audible, but Marcus caught the resignation in its posture. It expected to be handed off to yet another being who saw it as a burden to be managed. "It knows basic standard and some technical concepts," the leader said, stepping back. "Zephyrian young mature quickly. It has the mental capacity of your human adolescence, despite being only 3 months old. Feed it processed proteins and calcium supplements twice daily. It will need UV radiation for proper scale development." He tossed a small data pad onto the ground. "Basic care instructions. Do not expect us to return for it." With that, the 3 adult Zephyrians strode toward their ship without a backward glance. Marcus watched them go, then looked down at Zix, who was staring after them with an expression of profound loss. The kid had just been abandoned by its own species, left with a strange alien who might mean well, but clearly had no idea what he was doing. Marcus suddenly felt the full weight of what he'd just committed to. "Well," he said, crouching back down to Zix's level, "guess it's just you and me now, kiddo. You hungry?" Zix nodded slowly, amber eyes bright with unshed tears. Marcus stood and held out his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Zix took it with small, clawed fingers that were surprisingly warm. "Come on, then," Marcus said, leading the way toward his workshop. "Let's figure this out together." As they walked across the cargo bay, Zix's malformed wing dragged slightly on the ground. The hatchling tried to lift it, frustrated by its own body's limitations. Marcus made a mental note. First priority was figuring out if anything could be done about those wings. He was a mechanic, after all. If something was broken, his instinct was always to try and fix it. Behind them, the Zephyrian ship lifted off with a roar of engines, carrying away the last connection to Zix's birth species. The hatchling didn't look back. The workshop felt different with Zix in it. Marcus had set up a small sleeping area using equipment padding and thermal blankets, but the hatchling seemed more interested in watching him work. Those intelligent amber eyes tracked every movement as Marcus repaired a malfunctioning ore processor. "Your people know a lot about engineering?" Marcus asked, making conversation while he worked. "Some," Zix replied quietly. "We build cities in the sky, floating platforms held up by gravity manipulators. But those are for the strong flyers, the ones who can carry heavy loads between levels." Marcus heard the bitter undertone and glanced over. Zix was staring at its twisted wing with obvious hatred. Must be beautiful, though. Flying cities. "I will never see them," Zix said flatly. "Flightless Zephyrians are not permitted in the aerial cities. They live on the ground level, in the shadows." "That's a hell of a thing," Marcus muttered, turning back to his work. "Judging someone's worth by what they can't do instead of what they can." Zix was quiet for a moment. "What can I do, Marcus? I am malformed, weak, abandoned. What possible use could I be?" Marcus set down his tools and looked at the hatchling seriously. "Kid, I've known you for 6 hours, but I've already seen you figure out how my plasma welder works just by watching, and you caught a mistake in my wiring that would have caused a feedback loop. Your brain works just fine. Maybe we need to focus on that instead of what's wrong with your wings." A tiny spark of something, hope maybe, flickered in Zix's eyes before being quickly suppressed. That night, Marcus lay awake listening to the small sounds from across the workshop where Zix slept fitfully. The hatchling had nightmares, chittering and whimpering in its native language. 3 months old and already carrying trauma that would haunt human children for years. Marcus had downloaded the care instructions to his tablet and spent hours reading through the dense technical specifications for Zephyrian physiology. It was like trying to decode an alien biology textbook full of terms he didn't recognize and metabolic requirements that seemed impossibly complex. But scattered throughout the medical data were references to flight mechanics that caught his attention. Descriptions of wing structure, muscle development, neural pathways that controlled aerial maneuvering. It read like an engineering manual for a very sophisticated flying machine. And if there was one thing Marcus understood, it was machines. He pulled up detailed anatomical scans of healthy Zephyrian wing structures, comparing them to the notes about Zix's specific deformities. The left wing had developed incorrectly during the final stages of egg incubation, resulting in twisted bone structure and underdeveloped flight muscles. The right wing was simply too small, as if growth had stopped partway through development. In human terms, it would be like trying to fly with one arm in a cast and the other arm amputated at the elbow. Impossible with conventional methods. But Marcus had never been conventional. He started sketching, rough diagrams of mechanical augmentation systems, exoskeletons to support malformed bones, servo motors to replace weakened muscles, lightweight materials that could extend wingspan without adding too much weight. It was insane. He was a mining equipment mechanic, not a biomedical engineer. He had no formal training in Zephyrian physiology or aerospace dynamics. The chances of success were essentially zero. But as he worked through the night, filling page after page with increasingly detailed designs, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. The kind of deep satisfaction that came from solving a problem that really mattered. Across the workshop, Zix's nightmares gradually quieted into peaceful sleep. Tomorrow, Marcus decided, they would start building something impossible. 3 weeks into their unlikely partnership, Marcus had learned that Zix was brilliant, stubborn, and utterly convinced that flight was impossible. The hatchling had thrown exactly 7 tantrums when Marcus first showed him the sketches for mechanical wing augmentations, declaring the entire concept foolish human optimism. "My people have tried everything," Zix insisted, perched on a workbench while Marcus fabricated lightweight carbon fiber struts. "Genetic therapy, surgical reconstruction, mechanical assists. Nothing works. Flight requires perfect biological integration that cannot be replicated." "Your people ever work with a human engineer?" Marcus asked, not looking up from his welding. "No, but then maybe they haven't tried everything." It had taken Marcus 2 weeks of careful research to understand why previous Zephyrian attempts at flight assistance had failed. Their technology was incredibly advanced but focused entirely on biological solutions. They tried to repair or replace damaged tissue rather than working around it. Marcus's approach was fundamentally different. Instead of fighting Zix's disabilities, he wanted to engineer around them. The breakthrough came when he realized that Zix's truncated right wing wasn't useless. It was simply incomplete. The bone structure was solid, and the neural connections were intact. With the right mechanical extension, it could function as an anchor point for artificial flight surfaces. The left wing was trickier. The twisted bones couldn't support normal flight loads, but Marcus had an idea borrowed from human prosthetics. If he could build an external framework that distributed stress across Zix's entire torso, the malformed wing could still contribute to flight control while the framework handled the heavy lifting. "This is not how wings are supposed to work," Zix protested, watching Marcus assemble the complex harness system. "Yeah, well, normal wings don't work for you anyway," Marcus pointed out. "So we're making abnormal wings." The harness was a masterpiece of engineering improvisation. Marcus had cannibalized parts from mining equipment, trading favors with other technicians for specialized materials. The frame was built from the same lightweight alloys used in atmospheric shuttles, with servo-assisted joints that could amplify Zix's natural wing movements. The artificial wing surfaces were the biggest challenge. Marcus needed something that could generate lift while remaining flexible enough for complex maneuvering. After dozens of failed prototypes, he finally settled on a biomimetic membrane made from recycled environmental suit material stretched over an articulated carbon fiber framework. "It looks ridiculous," Zix said, staring at the completed apparatus hanging in Marcus's workshop. "It looks like it might work," Marcus corrected. "Want to find out?" Fitting the harness required careful adjustment to accommodate Zix's unique physiology. The main framework connected to anchor points on the hatchling's chest and back, distributing weight evenly across the torso. The left wing slipped into a supportive sleeve that held the malformed bones in proper alignment while allowing natural movement. The right wing connected to the mechanical extension that nearly tripled its effective wingspan. "How does it feel?" Marcus asked, stepping back to examine the fit. Zix flexed experimentally, wincing as unfamiliar servos whirred to life. The artificial wings responded to the movement, extending and contracting in sync with the natural wing motions. "Heavy," Zix admitted, "and strange. But..." The hatchling spread both wings fully, creating an impressive span of nearly 12 feet. "The balance feels right. How did you know about the weight distribution?" "Worked on cargo lifters for 15 years before coming out here," Marcus said. "Same basic principles apply. You're basically a small aircraft now." They started with ground tests. Marcus had rigged up a safety line system in the cargo bay, allowing Zix to practice wing movements without risk of injury. The first attempts were clumsy, the servos fighting against natural instincts, but gradually, Zix learned to work with the mechanical assistance rather than against it. "The key is not thinking of them as artificial," Marcus explained, watching Zix practice banking turns while suspended from the safety lines. "They're just extensions of your natural wings. Let your instincts drive and trust the servos to amplify what you're already doing." On the 4th day of ground training, something clicked. Zix executed a perfect figure-8 pattern, wings moving in fluid synchronization with the mechanical assists. For a moment, suspended 3 feet off the ground, the hatchling looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a creature born to fly. "I can feel the air," Zix said breathlessly, landing with more grace than Marcus had expected. "The way it moves around the wing surfaces, it's like hearing music for the first time." Marcus grinned. "Ready to try it for real?" The first free flight attempt nearly ended in disaster. Zix launched from a loading platform 10 feet above the cargo bay floor, managed 3 powerful wing beats, then panicked when the ground rushed up faster than expected. The landing was more controlled crash than graceful touchdown, but Zix was unhurt and immediately demanded another try. "The angle was wrong," the hatchling insisted, adjusting the harness straps. "And I think the servo response time needs to be faster on the left side." Marcus spent 2 hours fine-tuning the system based on Zix's feedback. The kid had an intuitive understanding of flight dynamics that complemented Marcus's mechanical expertise. Together, they debugged problems that would have taken weeks to solve individually. The second attempt was better. Zix managed a gliding descent that covered half the cargo bay before landing smoothly near Marcus's workshop. The third attempt included powered flight, actual climbing turns that lifted the hatchling 20 feet above the ground. "Holy shit," Marcus breathed, watching Zix execute a banking turn that would have been impressive for an experienced pilot. "Kid, you're actually doing it?" But Zix wasn't satisfied with basic flight. Over the following days, the hatchling pushed the system harder, exploring the limits of what was possible with mechanical augmentation. High-speed passes through the cargo bay, tight spirals around support columns, precision landings on narrow maintenance platforms. "Your reflexes are incredible," Marcus said after watching Zix thread a particularly challenging course between hanging cargo containers. "How are you compensating for the servo lag?" "I don't think about it," Zix replied, landing beside him. "I feel what the wings want to do, and the servos help them do it faster and stronger. It's like having muscle that never gets tired." Word of the flying dragon had spread through the small human community on Kepler 442c. Mining technicians, administrative staff, even the station commander had found excuses to visit the cargo bay during Zix's practice sessions. None of them had ever seen anything like it, a disabled alien achieving the impossible through human ingenuity and sheer determination. "How's our little pilot doing?" Commander Chen asked one afternoon, watching Zix practice formation flying with a maintenance drone. "Better than most shuttle pilots I've known," Marcus admitted. "The kid's got natural talent that just needed the right tools to express itself." "And you built those tools from spare parts in a mining station workshop?" Marcus shrugged. "Sometimes the best solutions come from working with what you have instead of waiting for what you need." Commander Chen studied the elaborate harness system as Zix performed a series of aerobatic maneuvers 30 feet overhead. "Ever think about patenting this? The applications for human aerospace could be significant." "Hadn't really thought about it," Marcus said honestly. "This was just about helping a kid fly." "Well, you might want to start thinking about it. Word is getting out. We've had 3 inquiries from biomedical research companies asking about your prosthetic flight system. Apparently, the engineering community is very interested in your work." Marcus watched Zix execute a perfect barrel roll around a structural support beam. The hatchling's movements had become fluid and confident, no longer the clumsy approximation of flight, but genuine aerial mastery. "The credit belongs to Zix," Marcus said. "I just built the tools. The kid did the real work of learning to use them." That evening, as they worked together on calibrating the servo response curves, Zix brought up something that had been bothering him. "Marcus, what happens when I outgrow this harness? Or when the servos wear out? Will I be grounded again?" It was a question Marcus had been dreading. The current system was essentially a prototype, built for Zix's current size and weight. As the hatchling continued growing toward adult proportions, everything would need to be redesigned and rebuilt. "We'll figure it out," Marcus said. "Maybe build a Mark II version with better materials, more sophisticated controls, or maybe by then you'll have learned enough about the engineering to help design your own upgrades." Zix considered this. "I would like that. To understand how it all works, not just how to use it." "Nothing's stopping you from learning. You've got the brains for it, and you already understand flight dynamics better than most trained pilots." For the first time since Marcus had known him, Zix looked genuinely hopeful about the future. Not just resigned acceptance, but actual excitement about possibilities. "Do you think," the hatchling said carefully, "that other disabled Zephyrians could use something like this? The ones living in the shadows on my homeworld?" Marcus set down his tools and looked at Zix seriously. "Kid, I think you might just change everything for your people. Not just flying, but the whole way they think about what's possible when you refuse to give up on someone." Outside the workshop windows, the alien stars of Kepler 442c wheeled overhead, no longer symbols of isolation, but markers of infinite possibility. In the morning, they would test the new high-altitude configuration that Marcus had been working on. And after that, who knew? For now, it was enough that a broken hatchling had learned to soar. 6 months after that first terrifying flight attempt, Zix had become something unprecedented in Zephyrian history, a disabled individual who not only survived, but thrived. The transformation went far beyond just learning to fly. The young dragon had discovered engineering, throwing himself into understanding every component of the harness system that had given him wings. "The servo response algorithm is inefficient," Zix announced one morning, hanging upside down from the workshop ceiling while examining a technical readout. "I could rewrite it to anticipate wing movement patterns instead of just reacting to them." Marcus looked up from his workbench where he was assembling a new power distribution unit. "Kid's been studying programming for 3 weeks and now he thinks he can improve my code." "I don't think it. I know it," Zix replied confidently, executing a graceful flip to land beside Marcus. "Your human brain thinks linearly about flight mechanics. Zephyrian neural pathways process spatial movement in 3-dimensional matrices. I can optimize the system because I understand how the user's mind actually works." Marcus had to admit, the kid had a point. Over the past months, Zix had identified dozens of improvements to the harness system that Marcus never would have thought of. Better weight distribution, more intuitive control interfaces, even modifications to the artificial wing surfaces that improved lift efficiency. "All right, hotshot," Marcus said, handing over the programming tablet. "Show me what you've got." What Zix had was revolutionary. Instead of simply amplifying natural wing movements, the new algorithm predicted intended maneuvers based on subtle muscle tension patterns and neural firing sequences. The result was a flight system that responded to thought almost as quickly as biological wings. "How the hell did you figure this out?" Marcus asked, watching the test results scroll past on his monitor. "I live in this body," Zix said simply. "I know how it wants to move even when it can't. The harness just needed to learn the same language." The improved system transformed Zix's flying from merely impressive to genuinely breathtaking. The young dragon could now execute maneuvers that challenged the limits of physics, pulling G-forces that should have been impossible for the lightweight frame to handle. But more importantly, Zix was learning to think like an engineer. Every problem became a puzzle to solve, every limitation a challenge to overcome. Marcus found himself learning as much from the hatchling as he was teaching. "I want to design systems for other disabled Zephyrians," Zix announced one day while they worked together on a new joint stabilization mechanism. Not just flight harnesses, but mobility aids for ground-bound individuals, sensory augmentation for those with impaired vision or hearing, communication devices for the speech-impaired. Marcus grinned. Sounds like you're planning to revolutionize your entire species' approach to disability. Why not? You humans figured out that limitations only matter if you accept them. Maybe it's time my people learned the same lesson. The opportunity to test that theory came sooner than either of them expected. A Zephyrian merchant vessel arrived at the mining station 3 days later, and word quickly spread through their community about the flying abomination that lived among the humans. Marcus watched from his workshop as 5 adult Zephyrians gathered in the cargo bay, their conversation clearly agitated. Zix had been practicing aerial maneuvers when they arrived, and was now hovering 20 feet above them, the mechanical harness gleaming under the bay's bright work lights. "That is not natural," one of the aliens declared in standard, apparently for Marcus's benefit. "You have created some kind of mockery of proper flight." "Looks pretty proper to me," Marcus called back, walking out to join the confrontation. "Kid's got better control than most shuttle pilots I've worked with." The lead Zephyrian, distinguished by elaborate scale patterns that indicated high social rank, fixed Marcus with a contemptuous stare. "You have interfered with natural selection, human. This defective offspring should have been culled, not enabled to prolong its suffering through mechanical deception." Zix descended slowly, landing with precise control beside Marcus. The harness systems powered down with a soft whir, but the young dragon kept the artificial wings spread in an unconscious display of defiance. "I am Zix of the 7th Clutch," the hatchling said formally, "and I am not suffering." "You are an embarrassment to your lineage," the elder replied coldly. "These mechanical contraptions cannot change what you are, a genetic failure who should never have survived hatching." Marcus felt anger building in his chest, but Zix stepped forward calmly. "You're right about one thing," the young dragon said. "These mechanical systems don't change what I am, they reveal what I am. I am an engineer, a problem solver, a being who refuses to accept limitations as permanent conditions. And yes, I am also disabled. But that is only one aspect of my identity, not the defining characteristic you have made it." The elder Zephyrian's wings rustled with obvious irritation. "Pretty words cannot alter reality. You will never be accepted in proper Zephyrian society. These humans have filled your head with impossible dreams." "Have they?" Zix asked quietly. Then, without warning, the harness systems roared to life, and the young dragon launched skyward in a vertical climb that left the adults staring in shock. What followed was the most spectacular flying display Marcus had ever witnessed. Zix performed a complex aerial routine that showcased every capability of the augmented flight system. High-speed passes, precision maneuvers around obstacles, graceful spirals that demonstrated perfect control in all 3 dimensions. But the real artistry was in how Zix used the mechanical systems. Instead of hiding the artificial components, the young dragon made them part of the performance. The servo-assisted wing extensions moved in perfect harmony with natural muscle movements, creating wing patterns that were both familiar and completely new. The demonstration culminated in a series of aerial acrobatics that were simply impossible for unaugmented Zephyrians. Zix executed a triple-barrel roll around one of the cargo bay's support columns, then transitioned into a high-speed slalom course between suspended shipping containers, finishing with a power dive that pulled up into a perfect hover just inches above the deck. The silence that followed was deafening. "I may be disabled," Zix said, settling to the ground with mechanical wings still spread wide, "but I am not limited. And if you cannot see the difference, then the failure is in your vision, not my design." One of the younger adult Zephyrians stepped forward, studying the harness system with obvious fascination. "How does it work? The servo response time, the power distribution, the neural interface protocols?" Marcus watched as Zix launched into a detailed technical explanation, the young dragon's enthusiasm for engineering overriding any lingering hurt from the elder's harsh words. Soon, all 5 visiting Zephyrians were clustered around the harness system, asking increasingly complex questions about materials, control algorithms, and biomechanical integration. "This could help others," the young adult said quietly. "On our homeworld, there are many who live in the shadows because they cannot fly. If such systems could be mass-produced, that is exactly what I intend to do," Zix replied firmly. "But not just flight assistance. Mobility aids, sensory augmentation, cognitive support systems, comprehensive solutions for every type of disability that affects our people." The elder Zephyrian remained silent throughout this exchange, but Marcus could see the wheels turning behind his calculating eyes. Finally, he spoke. "You would return to our homeworld, despite knowing how you would be received?" Zix looked at Marcus, and the human saw both determination and fear in those amber eyes. They had talked about this possibility, but always as some distant future scenario. Now it was suddenly real and immediate. "Someone has to be the first," Zix said quietly. "Someone has to prove that disabled Zephyrians have value, that our limitations don't define our potential. If not me, then who?" The elder studied the young dragon for a long moment. "You would face persecution, mockery, possibly violence. The aerial cities are not kind to those who challenge established order." "Then maybe it's time the aerial cities learned about change," Zix replied. "Humans understand that diversity makes a society stronger, not weaker. Perhaps my people need to learn the same lesson." Marcus felt pride swelling in his chest. 6 months ago, Zix had been a terrified hatchling cowering behind shipping crates, abandoned by his own species. Now he was talking about returning home to challenge centuries of entrenched prejudice. "You don't have to do this alone, kid," Marcus said quietly. "I mean, if you want a crazy human engineer tagging along to help cause trouble." Zix's eyes went wide. "You would leave your work here? Your life among humans?" Marcus shrugged. "This is my life's work right here, helping you succeed, helping others like you get the same chance. Besides, sounds like your people could use some outside perspective on engineering problems." The visiting Zephyrians exchanged glances. The elder's expression had shifted from contempt to something approaching respect. "Very well," he said finally. "If you truly wish to test your theories about disabled individuals contributing to society, I will arrange transport to our homeworld. But understand, once there, you will face challenges that no mechanical system can solve for you." "I understand," Zix said firmly. "But I won't face them alone." 3 days later, Marcus stood in the cargo bay watching Zix perform final system checks on the upgraded Mark III harness. The new version was sleeker, more powerful, and incorporated all the improvements they had developed together over the past months. But more than that, it was a symbol of what was possible when someone refused to accept limitations. "Ready for this?" Marcus asked, shouldering his travel pack filled with spare parts and engineering tools. Zix spread the magnificent artificial wings one last time in the familiar space where he had learned to fly. "I'm terrified," the young dragon admitted, "but also excited. We're about to find out if humans really are better at solving impossible problems than everyone else thinks." Marcus grinned. "Kid, we already solved the impossible. Everything else is just engineering." As their transport lifted off from Kepler 4422c, carrying them toward the Zephyrian homeworld and an uncertain future, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that day he first saw a broken hatchling cowering behind shipping crates. Neither of them had any idea what they would face among the aerial cities of an alien world. But they faced it together, armed with human ingenuity, Zephyrian determination, and the absolute certainty that impossible was just another word for a problem that hadn't been solved yet. Behind them, the mining station grew smaller in the transport's viewport. Ahead lay the unknown, full of possibilities that neither species had ever imagined when a disabled dragon learned to soar on mechanical wings built by human hands. The real revolution, Marcus realized, wasn't in the technology they had created. It was in proving that the value of an individual couldn't be measured by their limitations, but by their potential to transcend them. And they were just getting started.